To round off our third session, we have Chris Padfield. Chris is a mainly arable farmer from the West Country. He's diversified both the farm and himself. Building on his other career in teaching and training, he completed a Nuffield Scholarship in 2016 on growing and nurturing talent in agriculture, and that's what he's going to talk to us about today. Chris.
Thank you. Which button shouldn't I press? Not
all of them,
not
the right
not that one. Right. Thank you for inviting me to come and speak. My topic is growing really exceptional and talented farmers, or basically the subtitle, Growing and Nurturing Talent. I'm going to indulge myself a little bit by explaining what we do. I'm not yet a monitor farm, maybe in the future. We farm 400 hectares, 3 hectares owned, 100 hectares rented in. We've done it no-till for 10 years. We've worked really hard to integrate livestock. We have a joint venture with 1,000 fattening cattle on the farm. We have like a muck for straw deal. We rotate both forage crops and grass crops around that rotation. We store 15,000 tonnes, working with people like Glencore and United Oilseeds. We rent out 11,000 square foot of workshops, 11,000 square foot of offices, and we're in the higher level and entry level schemes. My passion, though, is actually motorbikes. Don't worry, I'm not going to show you any more family snaps. There's nothing worse than looking at other people's holiday snaps. But recently, my sister, her husband and I went out to northern India, rode up to Darjeeling, and then through the length of Bhutan and the little mountain in the background is actually Mount Everest. And if you ever want me to hear me do an interesting talk, then I suggest you choose motorbikes, not farming. Now, how did I get into training and that sort of stuff? Arable farmers actually have a pretty sort of quiet winter. So 17 years ago, I started teaching NVQs at Harpy College, did that for a couple of years, realised that being employed was not my thing, so I went self-employed and I've set up my own little training company, and I've done that ever since and still do it now, and I do a little bit of part-time lecturing at a local university. And it's while I've been on farm and I've been training people that often the farm manager has come up to me and they say things like this one: training is a waste of time. Or some old boy will come out from the shed and go in, farming is common sense, you can't teach that. Or the other classic, I'm only doing the course to get a ticket for the compliance scheme. If I had £1 for every time I've heard that one, I'll be doing this by a video link from the Bahamas. Okay. Now, I'm not going to ask you to put hands up to see if any of you ever said those, but I am asking you to put hands up for something else. How many in your business have a written business strategy? Good, a few hands. How many of you have a written financial plan with targets? Okay. How many of you have a formal people development strategy that's written down? Great, 3 or 4 of us. And it's an interesting one, because when you talk to farmers, they go, oh, farm staff, they're our most important asset. But I wonder actually whether we do actually prioritise it. So I thought, let's go and do a study and see what happens. And this was the thing that really motivated me. Fewer employees in UK agriculture have received training over the last 12 months than in any other industry or sector. So I applied to do a scholarship. I jumped on my motorbike and I did 3,200 miles going through Europe. This is Gus Mensink farming 240 cows, all on robots in Holland. I then went out to Marcus and Nora Meyer in Nordhausen in the former East Journey. Fascinating, 500 hectares, 80 landlords. His skill is not farming. His skill is negotiation and keeping everybody else happy. Interesting, it was really fascinating. Nordhausen is where they launched the V2 rockets from. It was the most bombed place in Europe in the Second World War. So that was quite interesting to find out. I went down to Bavaria to look at how they do apprenticeships. Apprenticeships in Germany are stunning. They're free to the age of 23, a year in college, a year out, a year in college, a year out, a year back in college. It's not worth going on about because we are never going to get free apprenticeships to the age of 23, but they really do it well. Then went out to parts of America. This is Jim and Tully, and he does 1,700 cows, 45 staff, and a fairly big silage pusher. We went to see Wes Fraze in Canada. That's his seed hopper. I think he can do my entire farm with that seed hopper. And what fascinated was going around his farm. I said, what are the 2 biggest risks to your farm? And he said, divorce and bad management. He was happily married. But what the point driven home was, it's the soft skills, it's the people skills, it's the management skills that are really interesting, negotiating skills, and we just don't teach those in schools and colleges at the moment, or even when we leave. I spent a week in Quebec at the International Farm Managers Association conference, and I would urge you to join, it's fantastic. And then 2 weeks, that's in Boston, Massachusetts, growing indoor lettuce with LED lights and hydroponics. And then 2 weeks in Ireland. This is the Moore Park Centre with Poddy Kelly and Marion Beecher. I thought the Irish were absolutely brilliant at the way they were approaching training and the support they had from their government. Now, unlike the two previous speakers, I'm not clever enough to come up with 5 points. I've only come up with 3. But there you go. Feel a bit inadequate now. But I'll drag it out just to make it sound like I know what I'm talking about. All right. Vision. Good businesses have a clear vision and inspire their stuff. Now, I'm not talking about some vague thing about going to be the best or this or that, but a real focus, an unrelenting focus on recruiting, training, appraising, and retraining staff. People that know their role within their business. They know the vision of the business. They want that business to succeed. And dare I say it, they even love that business. That was the biggest thing I came away with. Secondly, farmers need to see training as an investment and not a cost. It's a really powerful statement, and I'm going to keep banging on about it. And the third one, a point that you've just made, that the UK agriculture industry needs a professional career structure and CPD. We employed a young man 2 years ago to run our grain store, and I sat down with him on a wet day and said, well, what's your career structure? How are you going to plan your career? And it's incredibly difficult if you don't have a mum or dad who's going to give you a farm at the end of it. And I think we need to look at that and create a framework. Now, I'm just going to go back to each of these 3 points in turn to how I got there. Do we really live the vision thing? I went out to visit Randy Lewis in Chicago. Randy Lewis was Senior Vice President of Walgreens. Walgreens is the largest pharmaceutical retailer in America. It's very, very impressive. And he was in charge as he grew that retail, the logistics behind that, from 1,500 to 8,000 stores. Now, that's impressive enough. But Randy's son had autism, and he was inspired by more than just running a successful business. He wanted to set up a business that people could work at the same rates of pay, the same standards, the same level of commitment as everybody else, an inclusive model, and he did that. And in the two most modern logistical stores that Walgreens have, between 40 and 50% of the workforce is made up of those with disabilities. And that's what inspired me, because he could take a massive business and absolutely change the culture so it was doing good as well as doing great business. And it also stacks up because he had 50% better retention and 50% fewer sick days than in any other part of the business. And his key point was, it's not about me, it's about us. And I think if all of us, whether we've got a team of 1, a team of 2, a team of 3, if we can inspire those who work with us and who want to love to work with us, then it's going to work. And just as an aside on this one, his key recruiting policy was behaviours. He didn't really care about qualifications. He wanted to know that he could have the right behaviours, and he concentrated almost exclusively on promoting good behaviours in his workforce. My second point. Compared to the national average of 4.2 days per year, agriculture employers provided 2.5 of training per employer per year. Let me illustrate that point slightly. This is an Ursus tractor. It was built on the Polish-Russian border just after the war, and apparently it could even run on things as good as rancid butter. For you techies amongst you, I'll show you a video of this driving around. Now, what's that got to do with us? How many of you in the room have bought a tractor in the last 5 years? Good. That's loads of money. How many of you have provided training on how to drive a tractor correctly for your farm staff over the last 5 years? Great, about half of you. The reason I asked that, I visited the 2 biggest manufacturers of tractors, and I asked them, what is the quality of the driving on your flagship tractors? And they both estimated less than 50% of tractors actually drive those big tractors correctly as designed and optimally done. So 50% of our tractor drivers are just seat attendants. And if we're willing to spend 150, 200,000 on a tractor but not actually spend any money or time on training them, are we really getting a return on the capital that we invested? So I went on to look at this, and I visited Jim and Tully. Sorry, I didn't. That's the wrong name. I got carried away there. Excuse me. It's just John Tully. He was a civil engineer working in Coventry, and he had 90 staff working for him. And then he went back, and he now runs a 600 cow herd in Ireland. He also runs a staff dairy training program and what's the right word I'm looking for? Dairy supply company, a labour supply company. Sorry about that. Now, he's taken a lot of the principles from civil engineering back. So he does a lot of training. He does a lot of toolbox talks. He recognises that you're 6 times more likely to die on a farm than on a civil engineering site. So he spends a lot of time on making sure everybody's doing it correctly, that everything is documented and works properly. But also he has a training budget, and he puts a 500 euros a year aside so they can run training courses that they think are relevant to their farm and their progression. When I worked that out, it used to, I say, about £1 a day, but with the pound euro at the moment, it's probably nearer £2 a day. Now, I know what you're thinking. If I have a training budget, if I train them, they might leave. Okay? But the point he was making is that if you don't train them, they might stay. Okay? And what John really wanted was a scheme which reflected agriculture as a respected career that has a career progression for staff and is professional. Now, my third point is this. In UK agriculture, 88% of farm businesses employ 4 or fewer people, most of whom do not have HR departments or formal training plans. I suspect that's most of us in the room. And if you look at this of a young person entering the industry, maybe as a ploughman, maybe as a stockman, how are they going to get their career sorted? How are they going to progress? And I've noticed in our area, we see a lot of young people starting out as contractors. They're great when they're a one-man band, but when they get to 2, 3 or 4 people, it all falls apart because they just don't have those skills and experience to manage a business properly. So I was very grateful to Tess Howe here of AHDB for providing me this. I looked at skills development and all the things that farmers and farm organisations have to do to plan skills development. There are government departments, organisations, influencing factors. There are business drivers, market drivers driving the sort of skills you need. There's various provision. It's accredited, it's non-accredited. And there are other things like professional schemes and funding. Now, if we actually then go and put all these businesses, all these things up there, it's an incredibly complicated field. Those at the back, you should have gone to Specsavers. Those at the front, you won't have time to read all those. It doesn't really matter. Okay, the point is there's a really big amount of people with a vested interest in providing training in agriculture. But it's not an issue of supply, it's an issue of navigation. You as a farm business or a farm manager, how do you navigate all those influencing factors? And I'm afraid that the default position for most of us is that we just do the minimum required to get through the FABL inspection or the assurance scheme or to satisfy HSE rather than anything else. And I think if we're serious about career structures and CPD, we need to move beyond that. We need to move beyond compliance schemes and regulations to developing capacity and resilient skills. Now, how do we do that? Heather and her workshop did a brilliant one of these, which is far, far better than the one I'm putting up on the screen. So go and talk to Heather afterwards. But this is copied directly from a Dairy Careers Pathways thing from Ireland, and they ripped it off from one from New Zealand. And it's, they're quite open about it. New Zealand are way ahead of us when it comes to this sort of stuff. And they set out a career program for farm assistant, herd manager, farm business owner. What was important, and there's not room to put it on a screen, under each one of those, they would list the essential skills such as milking and grass management, the informal education required such as benchmarking, discussion groups, business management groups, and suggested training for progression such as staff management, time management, conflict management. And all I'm saying, with all these different awarding bodies and different influencing factors I showed on the previous slide, make sure that they all feed in so that young people coming into the street understand where they need to go to get that next step. Make sure it's naturally recognised and nationally recorded. And my final sum up on this point is that when we look at CPD, it's not giving someone a certificate, it is growing them as a person. And I think that was a tagline really for the study that I came back with. So to summarise, I genuinely think that new entrants to farming might be put off by a lack of professional recognition in the agriculture industry, which is the point that you made earlier on. Secondly, I genuinely believe that we should have a minimum skill level to produce food. I believe we need a certificate to farm. They've tried it in Ireland, both north and south of the border. When I spoke about this to an NFU meeting in my local area a few weeks ago, I had a very grumpy show of hands. Why do I need to have a training to farm? And I just said it's very simple. If you went for open heart surgery, I can absolutely guarantee you that you'd want that surgeon to be absolutely qualified, to be peer reviewed and to be at the top of his game. But for some reason we think anyone can go farming, and we almost pride ourselves in not having any qualifications. I also made this point recently where we're obviously, it's big in the news that we can't recruit enough staff to pick apples or to rear chickens. And again, we've always made sure we've had unskilled staff. So the government is saying, well, why on earth should we let unskilled staff in? And if we had a recognised standard, maybe the government would see that we need to have skilled workers in rather than unskilled workers. I'm going a bit political there, but there you go. I'm at the end of it. And also, thirdly, we need to pay for training. Subsidy, I think, has destroyed a lot of our farms in that we have done things for subsidy rather than from what we should be doing for the marketplace. And I would argue exactly the same, that if we go only for subsidised training, it doesn't deliver the right training to the right place at the right time. If you don't believe me, the industries that do the best training are the pigs and poultry industry. You look at the pig passport or the poultry passport, okay, and there's virtually no funding in those at all. But they respond to the marketplace. They know. The poultry passport I love, because every single worker in that industry has a welfare qualification, has a health and safety qualification, and 3 or 4 others. And I think the sooner that we start to pay, whether it's AHDB or another organisation to organise that, the better. And my final slide is just to aim high. Okay. Always look both to develop yourself and your staff. And if you're a one-man band, then plan your own career, okay, and go on courses to make sure you've learned the most. Thank you for your time.
Perfect, thanks, Chris. Take a quick seat now.